Hey guys, Kearon here with Explorminate. Have something a little different for you today. Hope you enjoy it. I've been playing the just a ton of Total War Warhammer 2 since it's been released and loving just about every second of it. Decided to put together a feature kind of highlighting some of the high points for me and some of the unique features about this particular iteration of the game. So what we have here in no particular order are my top 5 favorite things about Total War Warhammer 2. I hope you enjoy. First and foremost, we have magic. One groundbreaking feature included in the original Total War Warhammer game was the never before seen magic system. With its numerous lores or schools of magic, each race had access to a number of interesting buffs, debuffs, and damage spells. While it was always a lot of fun to cast a fireball or to watch a giant green orc foot descend from the sky to smash your foes, for me, spells themselves felt a little underwhelming. Thankfully, the magic system in the second game has been reworked as to build upon and refine the existing magic system, making it much more enjoyable as well as deadly to use. The biggest change is the inclusion of what's called bound spells for powerful magic users such as Mazdamundi or Teclis. These have long cooldowns but do not drain from your Winds of Magic reserve. These are essentially character abilities that are spells. This means more spells get cast, and some of these are just straight amazing. Take Mesdamundi's Ruination of Cities, for example. With its 2 cast limit, it will decimate even mid-tier units, and the risk reward is very enticing as you can easily kill hundreds of friend or foe alike. Teclis, on the other hand, summons a phoenix which literally rains deadly fire upon your foes and just looks amazing. These two examples are both a spectacle to behold, but they also mean that players can just be more potent with magic using lords as opposed to brawlers. While magic was just once a system I used to buff or debuff my units, now my lords can literally end a battle with hundreds of kills under their belt. Moving on to number 2, we have beautiful battlefield environments. Now, this might seem a little funny as something to focus on and to bring up second, but I just can't get over how pretty this game looks. I remember far too many washed out deserts, or like in the Badlands, or the really terribly dull looking snow Northlands from the original game. While some snow maps still leave a little bit to be desired, jungles, deserts, and even some of the tundra maps look just amazing. The sequel does recommend a more beefy graphics card than its predecessor, and things like increased vegetation and other small details are really good additions that give me even more of a reason to sit back and watch my armies duke it out, as opposed to give commands like I should be. I mean, just look at this jungle city, for example. You've got the coast, you've got the city ruins, the background, everything just gives you pause and helps draw you into this beautiful and terrible world that Creative Assembly has provided for players. For a game that it has at least partially always been about the scale and beauty of war as much as the minute-to-minute gameplay decisions, Total War Warhammer 2 does not disappoint visually. Coming in hot at number 3, we have monsters. Now, monsters were not absent by any stretch of the imagination from the original game, but Creative Assembly has taken these monstrosities to a new level. The inclusion of the Lizardmen as a playable race essentially means we get dinosaurs riding dinosaurs. And what's not to love about this model? Look at this Saurus warrior close in for the kill. Now, while these dinos come in all shapes and sizes, everyone is sure to bring a smile to your face as it tears through the enemy lines. Let's just say I can't wait for the combined map so I can face some mammoths versus dinosaurs. But with the monsters, we aren't just talking about lizardmen here. The hell pit abominations for the Skaven look amazing, and dragons or hydra for the other two elven races can finally breathe fire. Limited to 3 charges, thankfully, dragons can easily take even higher tier units to half health if they get the right shot off. I'm glad that Dragon's full potential has finally been reached, as the lack of any kind of breath ability was a pretty big disappointment with the original game. Keep in mind the original races will get things like this Dragon Breath ability when the combined map, which is dubbed the Mortal Empire, launches in the not so distant future. However, still, where dragons or lizardmen might win big for the cool looking award, I would be amiss if I left out Skaven here. The Doom Wheel and other truly insane weapons Skaven bring to bear upon their foes are like something out of a nightmare. Total War Warhammer 2 leaves nothing on the table when it comes to giant killing monstrosities, which come in all shapes and sizes. For number 4, we have the narrative. So the original Total War Warhammer game was basically just two sets of victory options. The first being kill races A, B, and C while controlling so many territories, and what was called the long objective was kill races A, B, C with D being added and own more territory. The Vortex campaign is a crack at something different, and while not perfect, it is a good change of pace. The Vortex campaign essentially centers around stockpiling so many of your Vortex resources, and they are different names for different races, as you complete each of the 5 steps. Upon completing each of these individual steps, you're treated to a nice animated cutscene that adds some narrative to what you're doing, some sense of purpose beyond just let's kill everyone. I also appreciate with these that Creative Assembly has moved away from the in-engine cutscenes we saw in the first game and moved to more of an animated system that looks, I think, better and helps draw the narrative together. This also goes to add a nice, strong kind of background for those not as familiar with the lore. And, as I said, again, it's not perfect, but at least it's something I'm enjoying different for the time being. And last but certainly not least, we have race diversity. With the vanilla release of Total War Warhammer, we had a wide range of races that, for the most part, actually played quite differently from one another. And then with the ensuing DLC races, including the Wood Elves, Bretonnia, Beastmen, and the Norska, Creative Assembly seemed to, get out of their comfort zone and make races even more unique and more different. In Total War Warhammer 2, this trend of making wonderfully unique races is on just a whole new level. And let me break down some of the mechanics and the units associated with each of these races. First, we have the High Elves, or what I call them Empire 2.0, but they're so much better than Empire. They center around a unique mechanic that has to do with their influence. And influence allows you to do two things. First, you can use it to recruit stronger than normal lords. Like we're talking lords with traits to reduce upkeep of units by 30% for certain types, or gaining 40 armor and 30 weapon damage, things that really set them apart. Or, on the flip side, you can decide not to use your influence if you want to save it for other mechanics, and recruit lords that have somewhat of a disadvantage. Now, if you're saving your influence for a little bit of more intrigue, you can go use the High Elf Court Intrigue to literally boost or decrease the relation status between any race. It doesn't have to be High Elves. You can force Dark Elves to buddy up with you or start a war between two powerful enemies. It's really fun to use and to manipulate people. The way you generate influence is also pretty cool. The game gives you random events that you choose from that you can choose to spend money or have a debuff for a number of turns that will give you influence to your overall pool, or you can choose to lose some and gain a temporary bonus. Now, while their mechanics are pretty neat and quite different, their units are also pretty awesome. They come complete with great line infantry, from spearmen to armor-piercing swordsmen that literally cut the arrows out of the air. They're super fun to watch and quite potent in battle. But one thing that sets them apart from everyone else, they have like literally 6 different flying units. You've got Great Eagles, 2 types of Phoenix, and 3 types of dragons. The High Elves, they look the part of the race that thinks they're the most important and best in the world of Warhammer, and their units pretty much back it up as they go toe to toe with just about anyone. Moving on to the Lizardmen, who are quite literally the defenders of the world. No joke. Watch their introductory cinematic there. They're led by Ancient Slann, who are some pretty amazing spellcasters. And aside from being pretty strong when it comes to magic, I think overall their units have the best animations I've seen in a Total War game. They really look like lizards and dinosaurs, even the troops, not just the monsters. They're super fun to watch before and during battle. The Lizardmen's unique mechanic, they work to repair the geomantic web, I think is how it's pronounced, which is basically just a connection that they have between their cities. You build a specific building that boosts the level, and then it does depend on other cities, all adjacent cities, being that level or higher. So it takes quite a bit of infrastructural investment, but it does pay off, especially in the mid and late game. For example, how does plus 50 growth a turn sound, or the fact that your recruitment is just lowered by 25% and everybody starts with 2 levels of veterancy. Pretty big bonuses. Again, it costs a lot to make this happen, but it makes the Lizardmen a powerhouse. And then speaking of powerhouses, I mean the Lizardmen, they are quite literally dinosaurs that come in small, medium, large, and extra large. Nothing quite beats charging Stegagon into enemy lines, or a Saurus Lord mounted upon his essentially T-Rex. Um, Again, they're so fun to watch because they're just so different, and I can't stress enough how great of a job Creative Assembly did making these guys just look and feel the part. Their main battlefield mechanic that's kind of interesting. A lot of their units become enraged at 50% health, and what that means is when they hit 50% health, you no longer control them. Their bestial instincts take over, and they'll still attack the nearest enemy and things like that. But it is an interesting mechanic you sometimes have to plan around or can exploit depending on which side of the battle you're on. And enter the third race we're going to cover, which proves that the new world's not full of just good guys, if you will. We have the Dark Elves. Now, full disclosure, after nearly 50 hours of actual gameplay, I've played the Dark Elves in this game in just a fraction of the time that I've spent with Lizardmen and High Elves. So I'm sure some of the nuances are still beyond me when it comes to combat especially, and how to use those units. Um, but I do want to point out some of the distinct mechanics here, because that's part of why I love this game in Total War, is that the races play so different that it can appeal to many different play styles with different players. So a couple of things with the Dark Elves that are pretty cool, kind of gruesome but cool. First, they build their empire quite literally on the backs of slaves. You generate slaves after winning battles, and you have some mechanisms to kind of determine which cities they go to, but it allows you to increase your income at the cost of public order. So it's a fun kind of min-max you get to play, and you can generate some pretty potent economies, it seems like, with the Dark Elves. Um, and also, if you're looking for more of a combat mechanic there, they can field black arcs, which are massive naval ships. And the best thing I can compare them to is quite literally floating beastmen settlements. They have growth and everything that allows you to recruit units on the go, can provide buffs and abilities on the battlefield. Pretty cool to use. Very limited use personally, but it will be cool to see how they work. Um, when it comes to units, the Dark Elves, they have a lot of similarities with the High Elves in terms of really a great variety of line infantry, swordsmen, spearmen, halberders, your armor-piercing executioners with their massive swords and such. Uh, they also filled probably my favorite ranged unit, the repeater crossbowmen unit. They got armor piercing, they shoot super fast. They're just a lot of fun to use and just wipe units out. In terms of monsters, they've got Cold One riders that pull chariots, and then Cold Ones, they're literally like the dinosaurs that some of their cavalry ride. And then they've got Harpies and Hydra. So a really good selection of monsters, not quite as like high level as maybe the High Elves in terms of beautier things, but they really bring that grit and that punch to the battlefield. And finally, last, we have the ever so devious Skaven. Now, I can tell I'm going to love the Skaven because they're so different. I just really haven't had a chance to fall in love with them yet. They operate with a really cool mechanic of food. And what food is, you generate it. It is quite literally food. You have to feed your ravenous hordes of rats. And it's used for a couple of pretty nifty things. So first off, when you go into battle, you can literally increase the number of low tier units you summon, but you expend food and you can summon 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes more of these units onto the battlefield, which you can summon anywhere. You can flank attack. It's part of just the great Skaven master plan. Now, once you've expended some of this food to overcome your enemies in some ever so underhanded ways, once you win the battle, you take the settlement. Now, food comes into almost, I would say, even more importance after you're taking a settlement because you can use food to increase the level of the settlement. So yes, instead of it being a rank 1 settlement, you can quite literally make it rank 2 or rank 3, and it costs a lot of the resource of food, but you can gain it back pretty quickly. So if you kind of stagger your conquest, it's a really cool way to make sure Empire stays pretty developed, which is beneficial because, Skaven are a little weaker in some ways. You got to play them a little differently. It doesn't mean they're um, at a disadvantage. I mean, if you look here, they are just crazy. You've got rat ogres, hell pit abominations. Um, you've got some pretty elite Skaven here on the line here, actually, but they've got all kinds of devious tools to their advantage. They've got warp stone throwers. They've got um, death something god. I forget their names, but they throw poison, they summon rats, they add chaos to the battlefield, and they don't care if they're hurting their own unit or someone else's. And that's really why it's so fun to play Skaven, because it is just literally pure chaos, and it doesn't matter. You don't value your troops any more than the enemy, but you come out on top. So they're a very different race from anything I've played, but super fun from what I've done. And the ability to summon rats anywhere on the battlefield is pretty awesome for disrupting archers, artillery, you name it. And there we have it. My top 5 favorite things about Total War Warhammer 2. Hope you're enjoying the game. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, I appreciate you watching. Until next time, thanks.